Hello, my name is Charlie Roadhouse, and in this video I'm going to be walking you through if statements in Python. If statements are a great way for us to control code, control the user, and do lots of other things within code, and they're a really essential part of programming. So, I'm going to start by walking you through what is required of an if statement, what an elif statement is, and what an else statement is, before looking at different types, a few different things we can do, and then some real applications of how we can use these in our games to make our games interactive. So on the screen we have num equals 0 as a variable. Then we have our first if statement. So if statements can be broken down into two things. We have our if keyword, and then we have our num is greater than 0, which is our condition. So if the num is greater than 0, then we print out this message, your number is positive. Else if the number is less than 0, then we're going to print out this message, your number is negative. Else if basically has to have a condition, and it can't be run at the beginning, it has to be under an if, and you can have as many elifs as you want. At the end, it's not necessary to have this, but at the end of every if and elif statement, there's usually going to be an else. An else is a catch-all statement, and this means that if none of the codes passed any of the conditions that we gave, then it's going to be caught in this else. So in this case, if the number is greater than 0, if the number isn't greater than 0 in the first bit, but the number also isn't less than 0, then our else is that our number is 0. So here for logical connections, let's just make this 47. Logical connections. So logical connections are not necessarily needed for this course, but I think they're a great thing to understand, and they really could bring more value to your game and maybe make your game a bit more complex. There are three types. We have and, or, and not. And means that both of our conditions have to be true. So on the first line, for the first example, line 19, if x is greater than 0 and x is less than or equal to 10, well then we're going to print your number is between 1 and 10. And this is the same for the elifs. If we were to have an or here, it would check to see if x is greater than 0 or x is less than or equal to 10, which means only one of these two would have to be true for it to run. Both could be true, but only one of them has to be true. So let's go back with that. And then let's have the example. Sometimes we call booleans flags if we need to use them for certain things. And let's call that op flag. Not is so the not keyword is the inverse. The inverse of whatever we do. So for boolean, the inverse of true is false. In binary, the inverse of 1 is 0. So if we want to say our flag is true, then we want to say the opposite of flag is not flag. Now you might say, why don't I just write false there? Well, I might not always know what flag is, but I might always want to know the opposite of flag is the inverse of flag. So this not keyword can be really useful there. In some programming languages, it will be represented with the exclamation mark, but not in Python. So this code below, or above should I say, what it's going to do, it's going to check. It's not going to pass because it's greater than 10, it's greater than 20, and it's greater than 30. It's also greater than 40. So we get to this elif statement here. Is it greater than 40? Tick. Is it less than or equal to 50? Well, it is less than 50 because it's 47. So we'll get this print statement here. So this is a really easy way, I hope, that you can see how we can chain elif statements together. And we have this else here just to catch any data that has gone above 50. In this example, I am assuming that the user has given me a positive number. So now we can move on to an implementation for your game. So one of the most crucial things that you'll probably do with your game is ask the user for directions. In the example I've give here, I've set user direction to the input, and then in the first if, I've checked if the user direction is equal. So this double equals here represents equals in Python. A single equals represents assignment. So if user direction equals left, then we print you've gone left. Else if, which means they obviously didn't go left, else if the user direction picked right, then we go right. And if neither of them worked, and we're assuming that the user definitely put something, we send them forward. So here's a more complex example, but here's an example of something that I think I'd want to see in a text-based game, because it really shows some user interaction, and it also helps the user be able to see what they might do wrong. It's giving some validation, or validation as it's called, a bit of user experience. So I've set the variable user direction to the input of which way do you want to go, and then I've created a list of called possible directions. Now you can just ignore this for now, just know that the list contains the 4 directions that I think the user might want to go. So I then created an if statement and checked that the capitalization, so this dot upper, what this will do is it'll capitalize all of the characters in the string from user direction. So if they've wrote left like that, it'll change it so it's written like that. So what I'm doing is I'm checking to see if the user direction is in here. Now I'm assuming that they've obviously spelled everything correctly and they've not put forwards or backwards. But again, that you can look at that if you need to in more detail. But for now, I think this is a good enough example. So I'm first checking to see if it's in there. If it is, then I will then check which direction they went. If they didn't choose one of the 4 directions, I'm going to print them a message saying please put one of the options. And in here, it might be a good idea to print the list or print the different directions they could go. And this is just a really good way to give user feedback to make sure that they know they're doing the right thing, because it could be frustrating if they're writing, the kitchen when kitchen isn't an option and you're not giving them any feedback. So now that we know the user has put one of my directions from the list in, we can check. So if the user direction equals the first item in the list, which is left, well then we're going to print left. If not, then we're going to check the second item. If it's right, then we'll print right. If not, we'll check the third item, which is forward. And if none of them 3 have been picked, then it must be backwards. Now you might say, how do I know it must be backwards? Well, again, to begin with, I checked at the beginning to see if it's one of these 4. So if it's not one of these 3, it has to be the 4th one. So that's the sort of logic and the sort of thing you can do with if statements. I hope you're enjoying the course so far, and I hope that these if statements will help you really push your game to the next level. So thanks for watching.